Hello everyone, tonight we are stepping into a world where spines bow to silence, where ancient creatures walked not on feet but on their very fingers. Not claws, not hands, fingers, tucked, curled, dragging the weight of muscle, instinct, and time. The canopy above you hangs like soaked paper thick with mist, and each step you take sinks slightly into the spongy ground. You are not alone. The forest has no wind tonight, but something moves just ahead, measured strange as if someone's crawling upright. You probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You kneel by the edge of a puddle, the kind that reflects too much and too little at once. The moon glints off the water's surface, revealing something almost human. Not a footprint, not even a paw print. It's long and narrow with deep crescents where knuckles pressed in, and just behind them, three indentations like claws that never fully extended. It's not a handprint. It's not a footprint either. It's both. You follow them, slowly, carefully, because something about them makes your own fingers ache just looking at them. These are the marks of a creature that didn't walk like others, didn't stride proudly or stalk on tiptoe. It bent, permanently, like it was whispering to the earth always, every hour of its life. And it didn't leave deep tracks like the big-footed carnivores you might be used to. No thunderous toes or fat-padded heels. Just thin impressions, 2 or 3 fingers in front, almost like someone testing the temperature of a bath with their knuckles. You try imitating it, dropping down on all fours, curling your hands into fists, then gently placing your second knuckles down. It hurts. Immediately, you feel ridiculous. Something pops in your wrist. Humans weren't built for this, but something once was. You shuffle along the trail, and the forest around you changes as the night deepens. Moths bump your face like lazy balloons. Something chirps once and then goes silent. It knows what's out here. A few meters ahead, there's a shallow depression in the soil filled with overlapping finger marks. A wallow, maybe. Or a resting spot. But there's no sign of a full body having lain there. Just hands. Like the creature crouched low, all its weight braced forward on its curled fingers, spine hanging above like a suspension bridge. You know how we evolved opposable thumbs so we could grip tools, pens, phones, even our regrets. Well, imagine giving that up. Not just the tools, but the idea of uprightness itself. That's what you're tracking now. A dinosaur whose hands slowly forgot how to hold anything but the earth. The forest seems to part for this thing. Trees bend outward where the trail moves. Vines dangle higher, untouched. There's reverence in this clearing, like the woods are afraid to brush up against the creature that made these trails. And why not? When you abandon hands as hands and turn them into stilts, you're no longer part of the grabby branch of life. You're something else entirely, a walking paradox. Historians still debate whether this kind of posture evolved gradually or from some dramatic injury lineage, a species that leaned forward once too long and never stood straight again. Some even argue it was a kind of submission pose forced by social pressure. Imagine your entire species forgetting how to stand proud because standing proud got you punished. Sound familiar? Another odd thing, the fossil record around here shows insect fossils alongside it. Huge ones. Some even trapped mid-air in amber wings, outstretched like they died in the act of fleeing. Which means this place might have once teemed with noise, buzzing, fluttering, chirping until the finger walker came. And then everything went quiet. Respect, maybe. Or terror. There's a small log nearby, old and half hollowed out. You touch it and it crumbles slightly under your fingers. Inside are beetle husks, dry and clean. Nothing scavenged them. You sit down on the log, careful not to make a sound, and stare back at the tracks. They don't run. They don't rush. Each step is deliberate, paced, like the creature was counting. And now that you think of it, so are you. Somewhere behind you, a drip lands on a leaf, then another. The humidity finally gives in. Rain starts soft and polite at first. It gathers on leaves and slides down bark, but the trail doesn't wash away. It's been pressed too deeply, pressed like a habit, like a ritual. And then you hear it, a low rhythmic sound like someone tapping the butt of a cane against damp stone. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 again. You freeze. No birds, no frogs, only that rhythm. Whatever made those prints, it's still walking. You don't breathe. Not because you're scared, okay, maybe a little, but because something about the sound demands reverence. It's measured like a drum from underground. Not the feet, you realize. The fingers. Each tap the result of hundreds of pounds balancing on a hand, designed for grasping, not stepping. And then through a slit in the trees just ahead, you see it. It doesn't stalk, it doesn't sway, it leans. The dinosaur is unlike anything you've imagined. Tall, but not proudly. It leans forward perpetually as if burdened by memory, by gravity, by an ancient design mistake. Its tail counterbalances its arched spine, and its long arms stretch out in front, elbows bent awkwardly high. Forearms angled steeply downward, ending in 3 fingers curled under like a pianist frozen mid-riff. It walks on the second knuckle of each finger, never letting the delicate tips touch soil. This is not how dinosaurs are supposed to walk. You're used to the upright postures, the T-Rexes with swagger, the raptors with scythe claws and attitude problems. This one's different. It's not upright, it's not fierce, it's resigned. Every step it takes lands in the exact center of a previous one, like it's afraid to mark the world twice. The knuckles sink in, then lift again, leaving those same deep, narrow gouges you saw earlier. But now you see the care behind them. It doesn't stomp it, tests the earth gently as if it doesn't trust it. The back legs are strong, but oddly cautious, bent more than necessary, making the whole animal look like a coiled spring that never uncoils. Its hips move in slow oscillation, tail waving like a lazy metronome. A walking contradiction, muscle built for speed but posture built for patience. You whisper even though it's too far to hear you. How did you end up like this? A light drizzle hisses through the canopy. Raindrops glide off its leathery back and trail along its spine, forming miniature rivers down the curve of its neck. The fingers splash delicately through puddles, spreading ripples instead of crashing waves. You notice it avoiding certain plants. It steps around patches of fern like a picky librarian navigating scattered books. Maybe scent, maybe superstition. Or maybe it remembers something about these plants that you don't. After all, this dinosaur was part of a world that never wrote anything down yet, remembered everything through movement. And its movement is strangely familiar. Not in form, but in emotion. You know that walk, that hunch, that careful way of not taking up too much space, of moving forward without drawing attention. It walks like someone who's been corrected too many times. It walks like a memory. Here's a fact to chew on. While your brain catches up in some modern reptiles like chameleons, fingers are split and fused for better grasping, but even they don't walk on them. They use them for grip. This creature, it turned its grip into gait. Paleontologists have argued about this one for years. It's known in the fossil record only from partial remains, mostly arm bones, shoulder girdles, and oddly warped vertebrae. Some believe it's a relative of therizinosaurs, those feathered sickle-clawed vegetarians with sloth-like arms. Others think it might be something completely different. A shadow branch, a failed experiment. Or worse, an animal so specialized it couldn't adapt when the world changed, like trying to write with a fork. Historians still debate whether this posture was an evolved necessity or a tragic compromise. One camp insists it was a feeding adaptation. Arms that could sweep low shrubs while walking. Another theory. It started as an injury that became inheritance. One bent dinosaur survived and passed its awkwardness on like an heirloom. You notice a small clearing ahead where the creature pauses. It lowers its head toward the ground, not to drink, not to sniff, but to listen. It stays still for several minutes, ears twitching just slightly. A droplet lands on its snout, runs down past a closed eye, and continues its journey uninterrupted. Suddenly, it shifts weight. One massive shoulder rises, arms pull in, and for a terrifying second you think it might rise onto its back legs. But no, it drops forward again gently. It can't escape its lean. Gravity owns it now. That shoulder, now that you think about it, looked inflamed, swollen even. You suspect arthritis or the prehistoric version of it. Walking on fingers probably didn't come with a great health plan. In fact, studies of similar fossils have shown joint thickening in places that shouldn't bear weight. Elbow spurs, calcified wrist tendons, even fused digits. Evolution doesn't always pick the most elegant design. Sometimes it just says, well, this is good enough for now. And here's something weird. During the Middle Jurassic period, some plants evolved low-growing fronds that curled up at night, possibly in response to gentle disturbances like fingers brushing past. Maybe this dinosaur didn't just adapt to its environment. Maybe the environment adapted back. The creature moves on. You crouch low, letting the canopy shield your outline. Something brushes your cheek, a moth maybe. You flinch and remember that you are in fact soft, exposed, and utterly unequipped to chase anything that walks on its fingers. It crosses a small rise silhouetted against a silver patch of sky, and for a second, just a second, it almost looks like it's gliding. Not flying, not floating, but moving with such practiced awkwardness that it achieves grace, like a dancer in slow motion or a street performer who's practiced the same strange movement for decades and forgotten why. Then it's gone. The forest swallows it like it was a dream. You're left alone in the puddled silence, knuckles aching from memory alone. You follow the trail more cautiously now, not because you fear the creature, but because you're starting to feel its pain. Not metaphorically, literally. Your joints ache from watching it. Your fingers curl involuntarily, imitating that bent gait, and for a moment you wonder if your body's trying to understand something your brain hasn't yet caught up with. The tracks here are deeper, not from weight, but from hesitation. Like the creature walked slower, dragged slightly, maybe limped. Maybe this is where it started hurting. You crouch beside one print, 3 narrow gouges where knuckles pressed in, but with faint smears behind them as if the fingers slipped before regaining balance. The back footfalls, farther apart now, are angled oddly, suggesting the dinosaur adjusted its gait. Compensating for something. Favoring one side. You're watching an injury in real time etched into fossil soft mud. The rain has stopped. That kind of forest silence returns the one that's not really silence at all, but a symphony of drips, creaks, far-off croaks. Still, you hear something else, a faint hiss. Not snake-like, not wind, more like friction. Something brushing something rhythmically. And then you find it. A piece of its world. Not fossil, not footprint, a bone, fresh, picked clean but still marked by time. It's not from the finger walker, you can tell by the size, but it's been chewed. No tooth marks, just scored, abraded, almost as if it had been used, like a tool. You lift it. The edge is polished smooth, one side chipped. It looks like it's been used to scratch something or someone. Maybe the finger walker uses old bones to tend to its own joints. Crazy thought. Then again, octopuses use coconut shells for shelter and crows use sticks for fishing. Why not a knuckle-walker using a rib bone as a back scratcher? You keep moving. The trail ahead dips into a shallow ravine. The tree's thin here. You can see more of the sky stars bleeding through clouds like spilled milk. And down in the ravine, caught between shadows and moonlight, is the full body of the dinosaur. Closer now. Its back legs are massive, more like a bird's than a lizard's muscle, coiled around bones that look like they've never stopped growing. But they don't lift high anymore. The ankles barely rise. And those feet surprisingly dainty. It's the front limbs that carry the burden. The forearms are grotesquely long, like a bat's wings folded backward. You can't help but stare. The wrists are swollen, distorted by generations of misuse. They're not hands anymore. They're strange, prehistoric crutches. And the fingers, those tragic digits, are gnarled, thickened with toughened pads, where skin probably cracked and bled over decades of walking. You whisper, "You're built like a broken tool." Because that's what it looks like. Not a weapon, not a runner, not a predator. Something designed for a job long forgotten, still performing it out of habit, not purpose. Like a bent wrench rusting in a shed, still loyal to a bolt that no longer exists. This dinosaur shouldn't be walking like this, and yet here it is. Head low, elbows high, spine like a suspension bridge sagging under its own weight. You remember reading somewhere that evolution doesn't aim for perfection. It just favors good enough. Maybe this creature was never perfect. Maybe it was just functional, and sometimes that's all survival needs. Odd historical fact. The first fossilized impression of this animal's handprint was once mistaken for an extinct turtle. Paleontologists thought it was a shell fragment. It took 15 years and a lucky fossil with partial digits still attached for the truth to surface. That's the thing about prehistory. Sometimes it walks on its hands and hides in plain sight. You move closer, staying behind a boulder. The dinosaur isn't feeding, it's just standing there, breathing, watching. Its head slowly swivels side to side as if listening for something. Maybe it's remembering the shape of a threat. Maybe it's just lost. Its face surprises you. Not the toothy snarl you expected. Not even reptilian severity. It looks soft. Rounded snout, small eyes, heavy lids, a tiredness you recognize. It's the look of something that's had enough birthdays. Then it shifts. A small step forward, but the left arm buckles slightly. It snorts through flared nostrils. Not in panic, just discomfort. You watch it brace, carefully, the way you do when lifting something painful. It redistributes weight across the other arm and continues. Every step calculated. Every movement a quiet negotiation between will and body. It limps through a patch of moss and disappears again into trees that seem to sigh at its passing. You exhale only when it's gone. Something inside you has shifted. You're starting to admire it. Not for elegance, but for endurance. Back in the ravine, you find more bones, some crushed underfoot, some arranged strangely. One femur upright like a marker. Around it, shallow scratches, lines, loops, spirals. Probably accidental. Probably. You sit beside the bone marker and feel the earth beneath your palms. Wet, cold, alive. You think about all the animals in history that went upright, who stood tall, looked around, and saw the world differently. Then there's this one, who bent forward and saw everything beneath. Soil, rot, roots. Historians still debate whether this dinosaur was doomed by its structure or defined by it. Whether its spine curved forward in defeat or in some strange kind of reverence. Maybe it wasn't tragic. Maybe it was devotional. You run your fingers along a groove in the moss, a knuckle mark, just one. As if the dinosaur had paused here. Looked up, waited. You stand. Flex your own fingers. Let them curl naturally. You wonder what it would feel like to walk that way, not out of necessity, but ritual. To greet the world with your hands every morning. The clouds part. Moonlight pools in the ravine. And for a moment, you imagine dozens of them walking through each, bowed, each moving in silence, fingers first. The rain begins again, soft and unhurried, like it knows. The air changes before you notice it. That faint humidity that was once soft now sticks to your skin like memory. The trail climbs again out of the ravine and back into the thick underbrush. But something shifted in you. This isn't just a chase anymore. It's becoming a question, a riddle left behind by anatomy scratched into time with knuckles and compromise. Why did it walk like that? That question pulls at you like a fishing hook caught in your ribs. You hike up the path, stepping carefully between the ever-present impressions. Always three knuckles, always spaced like punctuation in a sentence you haven't yet learned how to read. But the grammar of its gait is oddly precise. Regular spacing. Even in incline, it doesn't switch to hind leg power like most quadrupeds. No, this thing commits. The arms do the work, like it's paying penance through its posture. Here's the part that keeps scientists up at night besides caffeine and overdue grants. No one really knows why this animal walked on its fingers. It's not like evolution left a manual. There are theories, of course. Some say it was about reach, arms so long and neck so short they had to lean forward or fall backward. Others argue it's joint limitation. The elbow and wrist simply couldn't rotate flat, forcing the animal to bear weight in this awkward curled configuration. And then there's the avoid the claw theory. That one's got flair. Basically, the claws were too precious, too sharp, too fragile, too sacred to let them scrape the earth. So the creature curled its fingers up, knuckle-walked like a prehistoric gentleman, and saved its talons for the drama. Still, not everyone agrees. Historians still debate whether this was a one-species quirk or part of a broader evolutionary experiment. Was it isolated? Or the surviving cousin of a whole group that leaned forward, walked with hands, and vanished before their bones could fossilize? You pause near a fallen log and test it again yourself. You drop down, curl your own fingers, and try a single step. Snap. Nope. Your wrist protests immediately, and your middle knuckle lets out an ominous little crack that echoes louder than you'd like. You feel ridiculous, a soggy primate trying to cosplay a fossil. But as you sit back on your heels, you glance at your hands. There's something beautiful about how many things they can't do. They hold. They build. They write passive-aggressive emails, but they don't walk. Meanwhile, this dinosaur chose to sacrifice those possibilities for a different kind of motion, for a new mode of being. You wonder, did it feel limited or liberated? You notice another odd thing in the forest. Trees here are scraped low, about shoulder height on the creature, and only on one side. The bark is worn smooth in places like something has been brushing past for generations, always on the same trail, always the same lean. It's a habit encoded in the forest itself. And then it hits you. This trail? It's old. Not just hours or days. Generational. The same path walked again and again, until trees adapted soil, compacted, and ferns gave up trying to grow. This is choreography. The landscape is participating. That's when you find it. A skeleton. Or what's left of one. Curved in the familiar question mark. Spine bowed, arms stretched forward, fingers bent inward like a prayer half-finished. But this one didn't die walking. It died curled, laying on its side like a child or a dog. You kneel beside it. Its claws are intact, sharp, crescent-shaped, untouched by wear. They were never used for walking. The tips are clean, perfect, curved, like poetry. The rest of the fingers, though those bones are thick, dense. The joints are swollen, fused in some cases. You trace one with your fingertip and you swear you can feel the pain echoing from the past. It must have hurt, like walking on folded wrists every day of your life, like carrying yourself forward with hands designed to reach up, not bear down. So you sit beside the skeleton and wonder, why did it keep walking that way? Why didn't it evolve something better? And that's the cruel little secret of natural history. Sometimes things don't get better. Sometimes evolution isn't a staircase. It's a hallway full of locked doors, and you pick the least terrible one. You adapt, not because it's ideal, but because the alternative is extinction. You whisper, you didn't walk like this because you wanted to. You walked like this because you had to. And just then, something scuttles in the underbrush. A lizard, probably. or a mammal. You forget sometimes that this world was shared. That while these giants struggled with posture and purpose, smaller creatures were inventing cleverness. Teeth, speed, warmth. You rise again and continue along the trail. It narrows now, the trees tighten. The claw marks are more frequent. You see places where the creature must have leaned against trunks to rest rubbed. Bark raw left flecks of old skin behind. Not scales exactly. Something in between. Like hardened velvet. And all along the way, you keep asking, why did it walk on its fingers? Theories swirl like mist. Maybe it started as a feeding posture, then turned habitual. Maybe young ones learned it through mimicry. Maybe adults enforced it. Cultural pressure isn't just a human thing. Even birds pass down calls and dances. Maybe finger walking wasn't just physical. Maybe it was behavioral. Maybe it was ritual. And now walking this same trail, fingers tingling with borrowed memory, you realize something chilling. You haven't seen any fresh footprints for a while. Just the same ones, over and over. Like the path is still here, but the walker is long gone. You stop. The air is cold now. The moon's gone behind clouds. You turn slowly, eyes, scanning ears, tuned to any hint of that familiar three-beat rhythm. But there's nothing, only silence. And the faded ghost of a trail made by a creature too stubborn or too scared to ever walk upright again. There's a moment standing there among the prints where you almost believe the trail itself is alive. It winds like a vein through the forest, pulsing not with blood but memory. Every depression in the soil feels recent, like the creature just passed through, even if you now suspect it hasn't been here in years or centuries. You kneel beside one of the clearer impressions, this one deeper than the rest. 3 heavy knuckle marks in front and behind them, scuffed earth. A struggle. You run your hand along the ridge of disturbed dirt where something once kicked, flailed, maybe fell. A feeding site, maybe? Or a fight. The soil's been scratched, clawed in chaotic loops. Not the elegant walking lines you've seen so far. This is different. Desperate. And there. In the center, several shallow scoops, as if a smaller body had been dragged away. Prey. You exhale softly. So this one did hunt, or at least scavenge. The trail of the prey is faint, almost obliterated by the flurry of fingerprints and toe drags, but you can still trace the mess of movement. Something small, fast, not fast enough. You walk the edges of the site, squinting for more signs. A cracked shell, a snapped feather stem, and then you see it, a stone darkened by something organic long dried. You don't need to guess. You know what happened here. The finger walker caught something, and whatever it was, it didn't go down quietly. But what's stranger is how little is left. No bones, no hide, not even teeth, just dust, claw marks, and silence. You think about how modern predators leave signatures. Wolves dismember, lions catter, hyenas pulverize. But this is erasure, surgical, precise, almost shy, like it didn't want to be seen feeding. You sit down on a mossy root nearby and try to picture it. The dinosaur you saw earlier. Hunched, bent arms extended unnaturally far ahead. Fingers curled under like insect legs. How would something like that hunt? You imagine the moment, the stillness, the patient silent approach, leaning forward so far it almost collapses under its own mass, but balancing delicately like a marionette in the dark. Each step placed softly, silently, knuckles brushing the dirt without noise. And then, without roar or rumble, it strikes. But not like a raptor. It doesn't leap. It doesn't slash. It envelops. Those long arms wrap forward wide as a net. The claws, those sacred unused tips, sweep inward like a collapsing trap. No dramatics, just a sudden end. You shiver, not from fear exactly, but from the eeriness of the idea. A predator that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't chase or intimidate. It simply is. Silent, precise, purposeful. Odd fact. The closest modern analog isn't a mammal or even a bird, it's the giant anteater. Long arms, claws kept curled, walking on the knuckles. It moves slowly, cautiously, using its claws only when it must, and when it does, they can eviscerate jaguars. But most of the time, it just walks. You wonder, was the finger walker like that? A creature of restraint? A hunter that hated hunting? Or maybe it wasn't a predator at all. Maybe this was scavenging. Opportunistic. The claw mark's just a panicked meal in a dying world. Historians still debate whether this species was primarily carnivorous or omnivorous. The teeth, when they find them, are inconclusive. Small, weak serrations, not great for bone, not quite right for plants. Caught in the middle, like a fork too dull to stab but too sharp to scoop. The eternal buffet dilemma. You run your hand over a faint drag mark. Whatever it ate here, it took away with it. To hide, to share, you realize you haven't considered social behavior yet. What if it wasn't alone? What if the strange posture wasn't individual suffering but cultural? A whole group of bowed creatures moving in rhythm like monks in procession, hands curled, heads down, walking not for dominance but for unity. The idea startles you, not because it's terrifying, but because it's gentle. So much of prehistory is imagined through teeth and jaws. But here's something else entirely. A society of silent finger walkers bound not by violence but by posture, bodies shaped not just by need but by choice. You get up and follow the tracks again. They resume clean, and even now, the chaos of the feeding moment is gone, replaced by steady progress, almost as if the act of eating had to be left behind quickly, discreetly. Further along the trail, you find another strange formation, several finger marks overlapping in a circle. No footprints, just knuckle impressions, deliberate, arranged. You trace them with your own hand and feel the chill return. Were they gathered? A social ritual. You sit at the edge of the ring and picture it, several of them leaning inward, heads close, arms forward, fingers curled against the earth. A conversation. A morning, maybe nothing at all. But you can't shake the sense that something was shared here. That this wasn't a solitary life after all. A breeze picks up, finally. The ferns sway. The air feels lighter. You look up and see a break in the canopy. A shaft of moonlight falls perfectly across the ring of a prince. It illuminates the ridges in the soil, casting shadows like ribs. You take it as an invitation. You step into the circle. Lower yourself slowly. Bend forward. Place your knuckles gently in the soft dirt. You feel ridiculous again. And then something shifts in your shoulders, a stretch, a burn. Not painful, but different. Like your body is remembering something older than it should. A feeling of weight shared evenly across both halves. Like you're meant to carry yourself this way. You breathe. And for one impossible second, you think, I understand now. Then it passes. Just rain, just dirt, just old impressions in soil. But still, you rise, and with one last glance at the circle, you continue on. The trail narrows again. The prints stretch farther apart now. The dinosaur was speeding up, or limping harder. Hard to tell. Maybe both. The hunt or the memory of it had changed its rhythm. You realize something else too. The claw marks are gone now, as if after eating it curled its sacred fingers back and protecting them again, preserving them, not for fighting, but for whatever came next. You barely notice how quiet it's gotten. No frogs, no owls, not even wind brushing the canopy. It's the kind of quiet that arrives with a predator, but this one doesn't come with roars or panic. It's the kind of silence that tiptoes in and kneels beside you. You follow the trail deeper into the forest where the floor changes. Less mud, more leaves. The kind of deadfall that crunches underfoot if you're not careful. Which is why you're surprised to find the tracks continue just as cleanly unbroken, unsmudged, as if nothing had been disturbed at all. But you know it passed through. Because you spot something ahead. Not a footprint this time. A tuft of down, pale, iridescent, clinging to a low branch like forgotten gauze. The kind of feather you'd expect from a bird, but this came from something else. The underbelly, perhaps. A patch of fluff caught while it slinked underneath the vines, dragging its silent body forward. This dinosaur was hunting, and you found its stage. The forest opens into a natural amphitheater of stone and root, sunken just enough to trap sound to muffle movement. You pause at the edge. The floor is carpeted in dry needles perfect for camouflaging a heavy body. The walls are ringed with tall fern trunks, brittle and hollow. Perfect echo chambers. And now you understand. It didn't just walk silently, it chose silence. The finger walker evolved not just for stealth but for silence itself. Each motion fine-tuned. Elbows lifted to keep the forearms from rustling brush. Fingers curled not just for anatomical necessity, but to prevent even the claws from scraping. The pads on its knuckles, thick and calloused, absorbed shock. Footfalls spread wide to avoid snapping branches. It moved like a mime trained by the forest. There's a word for that, crypsis, the art of not being noticed. Some creatures change color, others play dead. This one changed the very sound of its life. You crouch low, trying to stay out of the open. Your ears adjust. You hear it before you see it. Tap, pause, tap, tap, a rhythm. Not fast, not menacing, but impossibly light. Then, there it is at the far edge of the arena, emerging from a shadow like it was stitched from it. The same bowed posture, the same strange grace. But this one is smaller, younger maybe, or just thinner. Its limbs move with a dancer's control, each step deliberate like it's afraid the earth might scold it for noise. And it's not alone. Another follows, larger, broader, with a patchy hide and a noticeable limp. You recognize the shoulder bulge. It's the same one you saw earlier. The same long arms, curled hands, and watchful eyes. They're hunting together, but not aggressively. There's no urgency, no chase, just an eerie kind of choreography. One circles wide, skimming the edge of the clearing. The other cuts closer to the center. They move like fog, slow shifting and impossible to predict. Then the lead one stops, tilts its head, listens. You don't hear it, but they do. Somewhere in the undergrowth, a rustle, a shuffle, the kind of sound you and I would miss, but they seem to feel it with their whole bodies. The smaller one changes course just slightly, like a boat adjusting to the current. The larger one mirrors it, and then just like that, they freeze, motionless, statues. You blink and for a second you can't tell if they're still there. The darkness swallows them again, but then crack a dry twig breaks. Not near them, behind you. You jerk around, startled. Something else is moving through the brush. You sink lower, suddenly aware of how visible you are in the open. Another dinosaur. No fingers curled, no silent lean. This one's loud, upright, a classic biped. Its feet land with weight. It's scanning the trees, jaws slightly open. Not a finger walker, this is a predator. Or maybe a fool. Because it doesn't see what you see. It doesn't feel the silence. The moment it steps into the clearing, snap. Not a sound you hear with ears. A shift in pressure. The atmosphere tenses. You watch the smaller finger walker spring forward, not violently, not fast, just suddenly present. It doesn't leap. It glides. Limbs low, body forward, arms spread like wings that forgot how to fly. It doesn't tackle. It brushes. Those long, slender arms sweep beneath the loud predator's jaw. The claws never touch. They hover an inch from contact like they're just reminding it who owns this silence. The predator freezes and then bolts, straight past you, crashing loud, graceless. Fleeing the clearing like it just remembered it left the oven on. The two finger walkers return to their rhythm. One circles, one waits. The hunt, it seems, isn't just about catching something. It's about maintaining control. A reminder the real predators aren't always the ones who bite. Sometimes they're the ones who listen better than you can breathe. Odd fact. The hearts of modern birds slow drastically during moments of stillness, an instinctual survival reflex. Some researchers think this evolved long before flight. Back in the age of dinosaurs, quiet might have been more important than speed. Historians still debate whether finger walking evolved for predation stealth or both. Maybe it was all of the above. Maybe it was a form of passive dominance, owning a space not with muscle, but with silence so profound that everything else shuts up and listens. And here you are, listening, still crouched, still breathing through your mouth like it might help you vanish. The two creatures begin to leave the clearing. One walks the perimeter. The other retraces its steps along the silent trail. Their prints are barely visible. Their rhythm returns. Tap, pause, tap, tap. You remain motionless as they disappear. The sounds of the forest begin to trickle back. One frog, then another. Distant insects remember their rhythm. You exhale. You think about how much effort it takes for humans to be quiet. We build rooms for it. Headphones, white noise, and still we can't match this. A creature that doesn't just survive the forest. It sings with silence. Your knees crack as you rise and the forest seems to flinch. For a moment, you feel like an intruder in a museum where nothing is behind glass, only buried in moss and silence. The trail ahead beckons again, always with those same three-finger impressions, like a signature written 1,000 times by a creature who never knew its name. The soil changes texture as you move forward. Less leaf litter, more packed clay. The ground is harder here, drier. And something else changes too. The tracks shift. The front impressions begin to morph, less clean, less consistent. You notice some prints are smeared as though the fingers weren't curled as tightly. Some even show faint impressions of the full digits, not just the second knuckle. One, almost shocking in its clarity, is a full handprint. Spread out. Palm down. You freeze. That's not walking, that's falling. You scan the area. The spacing is irregular. Some tracks are bunched together, others staggered. You spot shallow scrape marks as if the creature dragged its belly or shoulder. You're seeing the story of a stumble. Maybe an older individual, or a sick one, or something else entirely. And then nestled between two of the deeper handprints, you find the remains of something even older. A fossil. It's embedded in a slab of sediment tilted toward the light like it's trying to be found. You brush away the dirt. Carefully, slowly. You uncover a partial arm, fingers curled under, just like the prints, and yet not quite the same. The fingers are longer, more delicate. The bone less dense. One of the joints isn't fused like the others you've seen. And the claw tips shattered. Worn. This one used its fingers. You sit back chewing that thought. Here lies an ancestor, or maybe just a distant cousin whose hands still reached. Still grasped, still did things other than walk. The implication lands like a rock in your stomach. The ones you've been following may have chosen to walk this way, but at some point in history, those fingers had another job. Grasping, climbing, holding, hands. You imagine at the moment when those hands stopped being hands. When over generations they folded, bent, hardened, until they no longer opened again, until they became legs. And here it is, preserved, a ghost limb, still trying to open. You glance at your own hands spread in the soil, still soft, still flexible, still capable of all the things evolution eventually gave up on. That fossil tells a story no print can a life before walking on fingers. A time when reaching mattered more than bracing. Historians still debate whether this shift was gradual or sudden, whether it came from environmental pressure or social imitation. One camp says it was necessity, arms too long to lift, so they became stilts. Another camp insists it began with infants copying elders who stooped low for food, and the posture became permanent by tradition. You lean back, trying to feel the posture in your own body again. You fold your arms forward, press your knuckles into the earth. But now it's different. It feels like mimicry, not curiosity, like you're participating in something older than science. Further along the trail, you spot more bones. Not fossils, just old. Worn, yes, but not turned to stone. These are rib fragments. Vertebrae and finger bones. Smaller, juvenile maybe, or a different species altogether. You trace the knuckle joints and notice the difference instantly. The wear patterns are inconsistent, as though this creature only sometimes walked on its fingers. A transitional form, 1 foot in the past. One curled knuckle in the future. And that's when the thought hits you. What if it wasn't evolution at all? What if it was learned? You've seen animals mimic bizarre things. Parrots that swear, crows that leave coins, elephants that dance. What if finger walking started as a quirk? Maybe one injured dinosaur adapting and others imitated it. And what if eventually they forgot why they started? You walk in silence, haunted by that possibility. Because then it's not just biology, it's culture. A society of creatures who turn their hands into legs because that's what everyone else was doing. Who handed down pain like tradition? Who leaned forward not because of bone, but because of belief? You pass under a gnarled root arching over the trail. Above it, scratch marks high up. A gesture maybe. A reach. You place your hand against it and for a second imagine being the last of your kind, leaving a mark where no one would ever look. Just in case someone ever looked. Odd fact, orangutans have been observed mimicking human behaviors for no clear reward. Washing clothes, combing leaves. Some do it for years, even if the person they copied has long vanished. Maybe the finger walkers weren't just surviving. Maybe they were remembering. Further down the trail, you find another print, this one pristine. The knuckles pressed with perfect symmetry. Behind it, 2 curved claws hover just above the soil untouched. Clean. You remember that broken fossil? Those shattered claws? The ones that used their hands? And now, these ones protect them. As if they remember something those older bones forgot. As if claws should never touch the ground again. You sit beside the print, unsure what to feel. Is this regression or reverence? Is walking on fingers a limitation or a choice? You don't know, but you can feel the weight of it now. Not just the body of the creature, but the weight of tradition, of mimicry, of decisions made generations ago and never questioned again. The forest darkens as clouds blot the moon. The air smells of moss and memory. You press your own hand into the earth beside the knuckle mark. Your palm sinks easily, but your fingers, your fragile, clumsy human fingers, fold too. You imagine a world where you never stood up again, where your children and their children walked this way forever, until they forgot what hands were for, until they forgot they had them. You climb a gentle slope where the trail twists through thinner trees and something changes. The prints grow lighter, less pressured. And then startlingly they scatter. Not a herd's stampede, no panic, but a branching of direction, an explosion of paths like firework streaks in damp soil. And in the center of it all, small prints. You slow down, kneel again. These aren't random. They're smaller, more erratic. Fingers sometimes drag, sometimes bounce. The spacing is uneven, even playful. Some impressions are almost perfect circles, knuckles pressed too deep in one place, not enough in the next. And in a clearing just ahead, half shielded by low ferns, you see it happening. A juvenile, barely shoulder height on you, covered in that same ghost feather fuzz you found earlier, but puffier now, so much so it looks more like a dandelion seed than a dinosaur. It's trying to walk upright. You freeze. It takes a few awkward steps on its hind legs, swaying, wobbling like a toddler in socks on a kitchen floor. Its long arms dangle, unsure of themselves. For a moment, you think it might pull it off. The posture is halfway there. And then it topples forward with a chirp, landing palms first in the soil. Oof, you whisper involuntarily. It tries again, this time with more drama. Tail out, arms stiff like it's walking a tightrope. It holds the pose for 3 steps, then gravity gently insists on a reminder. Down it goes again. This time it rolls into a sitting position, back legs bent, arms up like ta-da. Somewhere nearby, a deeper chirp responds. A second juvenile hidden in the brush joins in, and then a third. You blink. They're playing, falling and laughing and tumbling forward, onto their fingers like they're rehearsing a posture they don't quite understand yet. You don't realize how tightly you've been holding your breath until your lungs beg for air. One of the juveniles starts racing in a circle too fast, its oversized forearms slapping the ground at strange angles. It spins out and collapses into a pile of moss, squealing in whatever language it speaks. And then a shape enters the clearing. Massive, familiar, the elder. It doesn't scold. It doesn't interrupt. It waits. Its face is as impassive as ever. No twitch of disapproval. No flare of warning. Just stillness. Watching. And then slowly it lowers itself onto its own curled fingers. It presses its knuckles into the soil and stays there. A gesture. The nearest juvenile watches, then tries again. This time it drops forward not in play but in purpose. Not flat-palmed, not flailing, but properly. Knuckles down, elbows lifted, head lowered. The others imitate. One by one they mimic the elder's stance. The play ends. The lesson begins. The clearing goes quiet as the juveniles begin circling. Still clumsy, still unsure but trying. Really, trying to match the elder's deliberate pace. The same gait you've been following since midnight, not born into them. Taught. You step back behind a tree, because this is not for you. This is a ceremony. Not in the way we think of rituals, no fire, no chant, no feathers on spears, but something sacred in repetition. A ritual of posture, of instruction, of bones learning the way the world should be carried. And you realize the finger walk isn't just a survival tool, it's a gesture passed down. A dance taught by example, not explanation. You remember those early prints, the ones where the claws never touch the soil. This is how that happened. Not through mutation, through mimicry, through tradition. Historians still debate whether juvenile dinosaurs had structured learning like this, or if behaviors emerged purely by instinct. Some evidence suggests communal nesting with adults guarding and guiding hatchlings. But this is something more delicate, more specific. This is posture as language. Odd fact, in some monkey species, infants who are raised without visual examples of tool use never figure it out, even if their brains are capable. Mirror neurons, they say. We need to see to become. And here you are watching a prehistoric classroom with no chalk, no ruler. Just mud motion and muscle memory. The elder rises. Not fully, just enough to shift weight. A subtle cue. The juveniles follow suit. Their bodies wobble into the finger walk once more. This time slightly more stable. You see one hesitate, its hand flattens briefly, then tightens again into the knuckle stance. It looks up for approval. The elder doesn't move, but that stillness is a nod in itself. This isn't about comfort, it's about continuity. Because walking on your fingers isn't easy. It isn't efficient, it hurts, but it's the way, and if you're born into a world where everyone bows forward, you will too. Eventually. The lesson ends when the elder turns away. The juveniles break apart. One dashes for a bush. One immediately collapses into giggles again. Yes, you're calling it a giggle. It sounded gleeful. The third just watches the elder vanish into the undergrowth. Its claws twitch slightly. Then it walks forward, deliberate, proper. You're struck by the thought this creature may never know why it walks like that. Only that it must. Because someone did before them, and someone will after. A legacy of anatomy folded into culture. You stay there long after they've left. Not because you're hiding, because you're honoring it. The idea that somewhere deep in time there were creatures that didn't just survive, they taught. They remembered, they knelt, and passed it down. You're not quite ready to stand up. Something about what you just witnessed makes you feel like rising too quickly would insult the silence. So you crouch a while longer, watching the last few finger tracks vanish into the fern wall, where the elder had disappeared. The air here is thicker now, heavy with the scent of wet bark, moss, and ancient breath. And now you wonder, what does a life spent bent in half feel like? You follow the trail again and the change is immediate. The prints are deeper now, the gaps between them shorter. And sometimes oddly you see the front knuckle marks pause while the back foot continues forward slightly, leaving a dragging groove, like it hesitated, like it sighed. The trees are gnarled here lower. You find yourself ducking under branches, more often sharing the dinosaur's stoop without thinking. The world curves around this posture. Even the forest has learned to accommodate the lean. And then you hear it, not a voice but a grunt. Guttural, brief, like someone with a bad back trying to sit up from a nap. You freeze. You creep forward until you see it. One of them, lying down, not dead, not dying, just tired. The body is folded awkwardly, limbs bunched, neck coiled like rope back. Humped so severely that you can't quite tell where the spine ends and tail begins. The creature makes no effort to rise, it just breathes, heavily, like it took everything it had to lie down. And now rising is the real threat. The joints don't want to move. You can see the inflammation in its shoulder, the way the skin rises like bruised dough around the joint. Its elbows, once held high with pride, now rest half-sunken in the moss. The knuckle pads are cracked, bleeding maybe. You can't tell, but they look raw. You watch as it tries to shift. There's no grace to it now. No ghostly elegance, just creaking mass. It leans forward, tries to fold its legs under, fails, and collapses sideways with a grunt that punches through the quiet like a dropped boulder. The posture that once symbolized identity now betrays it. Because here's the thing. Evolution doesn't come with a retirement plan. Those fingers, so precise, so silent, weren't made to carry 70 years of weight. Those long arms, once elegant limbs of purpose, are now liabilities, sagging, twisted, dragging. You see one claw, just one, pressed into the soil by mistake, not curled, not protected. A gentle gouge cut where it slipped. A misstep, a moment of pain, maybe shame. It tries again. The hind legs gather underneath, the tail braces, and with an effort that looks almost like mourning, it rises onto its knuckles once more. Wobbling. You wince, because now you understand what walking like this does over time. It's a young animal's posture, a gesture of initiation, of ritual. But for the old, it's a punishment that never relents, a body that never gets to straighten again. A sentence. You think about human elders, our own bent spines, our hands curled not by choice but by time. The echo is chilling. We once stood tall too, and yet age humbles all vertebrae. Odd fact, sloths, despite their famously slow pace, suffer spinal degeneration as they age. The very thing they're known for, hanging. Moving slowly is what ultimately causes their bodies to warp beyond repair. This dinosaur. It's the same. The posture is tradition but also trauma. Historians still debate whether these creatures evolved specialized joints to compensate, or if their anatomy simply endured until it couldn't. Some studies suggest ossified cartilage, increased joint fluid reservoirs, band-aids really. Patches over problems that nature refused to re-engineer. You circle quietly, keeping distance. You don't want to startle it or worse, make it think you're judging, because honestly, you're not sure you could have done better. The dinosaur begins moving again, slowly. Every step now seems a negotiation. Elbows shaking slightly with the effort to lift, fingers pressing into the soil like they're checking for forgiveness. And it dawns on you, this one is likely alone. You haven't seen any other prints nearby. No juveniles, no pack, just a solo trail carved deep into the earth like a scar. And this one isn't hunting, it's returning. You follow the prints for another half-mile and each step becomes more labored. The spaces between prints grow inconsistent. A limp emerges. One arm clearly weaker now, its knuckle marks lighter, sometimes absent. You start seeing flat handprints again. It's no longer walking properly. It's falling in installments. Eventually, the trail ends at a shallow depression lined with bark, dead grass, and curiously feathers. Placed there, not blown. A makeshift nest. Or more accurately, a bed. It lowers itself finally in stages. First the front limbs, then the chest. It doesn't fold up like the juveniles did. It stretches long like it's trying to unbend itself one vertebra at a time. And then stillness. You don't intrude. You stay at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a tree, feeling like you've stumbled across something not meant to be witnessed. A private final act. Not death, not yet. Just rest that feels like surrender. You wonder if it dreams. And if it does, whether it dreams of standing tall again, of walking on palms, or of flying, of any other posture than this. You turn quietly and retreat. The sound of your own feet crunching sticks displacing leaves suddenly feels violent. Because once you've seen the cost of a life lived bent, every upright step feels like a luxury. The trail feels haunted now. Not by ghosts, but by choices. You walk with more care, no longer stepping where the dinosaur stepped. Those prints feel sacred now, each one a little prayer offered in the shape of pain. And then you hear it again, that soft, repeated beat. 3 taps, silence, 3 taps again. You follow the sound down a narrowing corridor of trees where vines hang low and the underbrush seems carefully parted like the forest itself has made room. The trail levels out and the canopy thins into a strange, natural clearing shaped like a bowl, wide, shallow, and quiet. You freeze. Dozens. There are dozens of them. The finger walkers. They move in arcs. Wide, graceful, deliberate. Not randomly, not like a herd grazing, but in a pattern. Concentric half circles, all facing inward, all moving in sync. You step back into the shadows, watching from the edge. It's like a ritual. They don't call out. They don't interact beyond subtle glances, the occasional twitch of a tail, or a pause in motion when one brushes close to another. But there's a rhythm here. A collective decision to curve, to lean, to press their curled fingers gently into the same grooves carved by generations. Their movement is slow but coordinated like monks pacing through a labyrinth. You don't hear dominance displays. No stomping. No threats, just the soft, rhythmic contact of knuckles against soil. It's not a hunt, it's a gathering. You spot elders among them, backs humped like weathered hills, steps labored but still precise. And juveniles, 2 smaller bodies mimicking the same lean, their gaits less smooth but no less committed. One stops briefly and adjusts its posture, pulling an elbow higher like it knows it's being watched. Like being correct matters. They move around a central patch of earth that's bare. No vegetation, no markings. Just worn ground packed smooth like a floor. A kind of courtyard. The kind of space cultures build on purpose. And then one of them enters the center. It's not the biggest, not the oldest. But something about it feels appointed. The rest pause. A stillness spreads outward in waves, one body after the next, halting like dominoes of breath. The one in the center lifts its arms. Not high, just slightly. Enough to straighten the wrists. The claws stay curled but hover off the ground. And then it bows lower, deeper than the others. And the herd responds. One by one they do the same. Lowering their chests, pressing their knuckles more firmly into the soil, not in pain, not in submission, in acknowledgement. This is a gesture that means something. You can feel it in your gut. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs displayed coordinated behavior like this. Fossilized trackways show parallel paths, overlapping prints, repeated routes. But no one can say with certainty whether they meant anything beyond habit. But what you're watching now. This is not instinct. This is intent. Odd fact, elephants return to the bones of their dead. They don't just sniff, they stay. They touch. They remember. Not always loudly, often silently. Maybe this is the same. You see that the central dinosaur is older than you thought. Its ribs show through the hide. One arm trembles as it lowers again. Fingers splayed, nearly touching the soil with its claws. The effort is visible, It shakes, but it completes the motion. And then it simply stands again, wobbles, walks back to the circle. Another takes its place. The cycle repeats. Not speech, not music, but structure. A lineage spoken through the spine. And that's when you realize they're not walking in circles because they're lost. They're preserving something, a memory, a gesture, a physical language that has no written form. Each step is a word. Each bent wrist a comma. The lean itself is the sentence. You wonder how many generations it took for this to form. For one awkward habit to become identity. For a compromise of the joints to become who they are. You wonder if any of them ever tried to break it, if any ever stood tall and walked out of the circle, or if after so many lifetimes the idea of rising is too strange to imagine. You sit at the clearing's edge, your back pressed to a tree, and you feel your own spine curve slightly, not from fatigue but from sympathy. You mirror them, just a little, a tiny lean. Your arms hang forward, your hands fall into loose fists. The knuckles press into damp soil. And you understand something you didn't before. They don't walk this way because it's the only way. They walk this way because it's theirs. This rhythm, this shape, this slow, careful gait handed down not by biology alone, but by reverence. What you're watching isn't just movement, it's memory. And it lives not in the bones, but in the walk. You stay at the edge of that quiet clearing until your legs go numb. Not from fear, there's nothing threatening here, but from a kind of emotional vertigo. You've just seen a dance older than any story, a ritual of movement carried in bone and shadow. And now, something else prickles at your awareness. They're not alone. There's a sound on the wind now barely audible at first. A crunch, a rustle, something less deliberate than the finger walkers, something heavier and breathing louder. You rise slowly and circle the edge of the clearing, keeping your body low, slipping behind thick-trunked trees, letting vines and shadows wrap around you like camouflage. You reach a ridge that overlooks a narrow gully, and that's when you see them. Eyes. Several pairs, reflecting moonlight like coins dropped in water. Low to the ground, wide apart, predators, but not finger walkers. These are built different, shorter forearms, wider skulls, legs thicker than tree roots. You see one shifting forward slightly, careful, deliberate, but not silent. It steps on a twig and it snaps. The eyes all freeze. They're watching. The finger walkers continue their slow procession in the clearing below, unaware or simply uninterested. Their gait doesn't change. Their circles remain unbroken. Maybe they've done this so many times they've stopped worrying about who watches. Or maybe they know something you don't. You look back at the ambush line. Predators waiting for weakness. It makes sense. A gathering of large, slow-moving animals would draw attention. Noise, smell, vibration. These predators, whoever they are, probably follow the scent of fatigue. But the finger walkers don't smell like prey. They smell like old things. Like stones that have never moved. And more importantly, they don't make noise. You remember the silent chase. The movement of the hunter you saw before, not running but sliding across the forest floor. You remember how sound seemed to vanish around them. Now you're hearing its opposite. The predators whisper to each other and growls, their breath heavy. One of them shifts position and places its hand down in the dirt flat. The sound is too loud. Even you flinch. A branch snaps under its weight. A nearby bird takes off. And in the clearing, the circle stops. The entire ring of finger walkers pauses mid-motion. No sound, no reaction, just absolute stillness. You know that feeling? The one where something hears you before you hear yourself. A breeze rolls through the trees and lifts the edges of the moss. You swear it carries a scent, something rich, animal. Tense. The finger walkers begin to move again, but this time not in circles. They change direction together, as if a silent command has passed between them. Not a stampede, a slow, angled drift. They begin walking toward the ambush line. And that's when the predators hesitate. One of them leans back, another flattens its posture. Their eyes shift not from hunger, but from calculation. this isn't going how they expected. You realize what's happening. The finger walkers don't fight with claws. They don't charge. They press. They push forward with silence, with precision, with weight. Their bodies lean in a way that turns caution into confrontation. A living wall of bent arms and unreadable faces. The largest one in the group steps ahead. A hulking elder with knuckles so scarred they look fossilized. It plants one fist into the ground with a sound like a drumstick hitting wet canvas. Thud. The predators scatter. They don't scream. They don't snap. They just back away. One by one, they vanish into the forest. Their noisy limbs no match for the wordless momentum of the fingerwalkers. And the forest absorbs them again like water swallowing stones. You sit back on your heels, watching as the procession resumes its spiral. The lesson isn't lost on you. Noise is weakness. Movement betrays. But silence. Silence is a weapon. Silence is armor. Silence is power. Odd fact, in some indigenous hunting traditions, entire groups train themselves not to step on twigs, not just individually but collectively. The hunt becomes a symphony of practiced silence. They say you can learn to hear what isn't being said. You look down at your own hands, soft, shaky, loud. You think about how you live through sound, phones, voices, engines. Everything you do leaves echoes. And here's a creature that survived not by overpowering its predators, but by becoming invisible to their instincts. Historians still debate how deeply prehistoric animals understood one another. Some suggest they operated on reactive instinct alone. But what if there was something else, an awareness of noise, of presence, of emotional territory? What you've seen tonight makes a strong case. The circle continues, not undisturbed but reaffirmed. You back away from the ridge one step at a time, careful not to break any branches, not because you're scared anymore, but because you respect it. The way of the walk, the way of the fingers. You reach the base of the hill and find another track fainter than the rest. A smaller dinosaur alone, not a predator, a wanderer. Its prints are erratic, unsure, and following beside it the prints of a fingerwalker, just one, carefully matching its pace. Guiding, not chasing. You imagine an older creature walking alongside a younger one. Not teaching posture this time, just offering quiet. You touch the trail and feel the story vibrating in your bones. A world that didn't speak but remembered. A society built not on strength but on subtlety. And in the end, the only sound you hear is your own breath, too loud now, but slowly matching the forest's rhythm. You move on. But this time you take your steps like you're being watched by creatures who no longer need to be seen to be understood. The path begins to slope downward, and the soil under your feet grows soft and saturated. You know this texture: mud, real mud. The kind that holds secrets for a very long time. And that's when you realize you're approaching a bog. You stop at the edge of a wide, stagnant basin where the forest floor has given way to a shallow, murky depression filled with black water and half-rotted logs. Dragonflies skim across the surface like ghosts looking for reflections. The air hums with quiet menace, and your instincts flare. Bogs are time machines, not in a romantic steampunk way, but in a cold, sticky, anaerobic one. Anything that dies here stays, not in fossil form, in preservation. You ease your way around the edge, trying not to slide. You're ankle-deep in muck already, but something catches your eye. A bulge beneath the surface, symmetrical, smooth. You drop to your knees and dig gently through the wet moss and sediment. And there it is. Bone. Not bleached, not petrified, just stained dark by time, intact and waterlogged, and still bent. It's an arm. Long tapering, forearms still attached to partial finger bones. The wrist is curled inward. The knuckle joints are swollen, even in death. There's cartilage still clinging to the ends. You can feel it, rubbery, alien, impossible. This one didn't fossilize. It simply waited. You uncover more. A shoulder blade. Ribs. And then further in, a neck vertebra still partially attached to the skull. It's angled awkwardly, like the animal was turning back in its final moments. You piece the scene together. It got stuck, tried to pull free, bent back to see what was happening, sank. The most haunting detail. The position of the fingers. Still curled, still pressed against the floor of the bog as if right up to the end, it was trying to walk out. You sit back on your heels and let the weight of that settle. Because this is the cost of leaning forever. There's no backup plan when the earth shifts. No room to rise when the swamp pulls you in. This creature didn't flail, didn't cry out, just walked the only way it knew, forward bent and slow until the mud stopped pretending to be ground. You look around, the forest here is eerily quiet. No recent trails, no juveniles. No sign that others came looking. Maybe they knew not to. Or maybe this was the place no one came back from. And still it teaches. The entire skeleton is splayed in motion, frozen mid-step. One leg extended, one arm still outstretched. You can feel the energy in it. Not drama, effort. This was a creature trying to live by rules that didn't bend when the ground did. Odd fact. In 2006, an Ice Age bison was pulled from an Alaskan bog with its skin and fur almost completely intact. Its expression, eyes closed, lips relaxed, as if it didn't struggle, as if it accepted the sink. You wonder if this dinosaur felt the same. Historians still debate how often dinosaurs got trapped in bogs and whether those preserved skeletons represent normal life or rare accidents. But this isn't just a fossil. It's a message, a final paragraph written in the posture it could never escape. You back away careful not to disturb the remains, but you can't help glancing back. Its neck is arched slightly. The face is turned toward the edge of the bog, as if it almost made it out. Almost. You climb the ridge again and find your footing on firmer ground. And that's when you see something that chills you in a different way. A line of tracks. One set, not fresh, but newer than anything else here, leading to the edge of the bog, then stopping. You rush forward heart-pounding, expecting the worst. But there's no body, no signs of struggle, just an abrupt halt. The last footprint is perfect 3 clean knuckle marks with claw tips curled just above the surface, as if the walker had paused at the edge and then turned around. No returning tracks, but something tells you this one didn't fall in. It remembered. It recognized. Maybe they teach this now where not to walk. Maybe the story of the one who sank became part of the ritual, a memory passed not by words but by hesitation. Because every step after that was silence. You trace your hand over the last print, trying to imagine the pause. The decision. The turn. That's the part you never see in fossils, the moment a creature chooses not to die. You sit there a long time watching the bog breathe. Even now you can hear its squelch sigh settle. It is always ready. Always waiting to tell your story in peat and pressure. But today the story ends with survival. With one set of prints that didn't vanish into the mud. And that's something. You leave the bog with careful steps and heavier thoughts. It's one thing to imagine the cost of walking on your fingers, it's another to see the receipt carved into cartilage and sediment. But now the ground feels different beneath your feet, like it remembers what you saw and expects you to walk more reverently. The forest darkens again, though not from clouds this time. The trees grow tighter. The trunks thicker. The canopy above forms a ceiling so dense it eats the sky. The light here is green and gold, filtered and suspicious. And it's here in the forest's ribcage that you find them. Spines. First, just pieces. Fossilized tendon loops striated like ropes. Then a whole vertebra oddly warped, shaped like it was crushed and then regrown. You run your hand over it and feel every twist and bulge. This was not a spine designed for vertical elegance. It was built for endurance. You walk deeper and the forest floor changes again, littered with fragments of bone, some long decayed, others still sharp enough to slice bark. All warped, all curved, none of them straight. You pause. Realize something uncanny. Every spine here bends forward. Every single one. It's as if the ground itself taught these creatures how to fold and they obeyed without question. You kneel beside a particularly twisted section 6 vertebrae, still linked, arcing like a grim smile. You try to picture the creature alive, not standing tall, not sprinting, but bent perpetually as if gravity was too persuasive to resist. And you start to understand something strange. These spines didn't evolve to carry the body. The body evolved to follow the spine, which raises a deeper question. What makes an animal that committed to a shape, pain, memory, or something more like belief? Historians still debate whether spinal deformation in dinosaurs was genetic or environmental. Some argue chronic postural pressure over generations warped the vertebral column. Others say it's fossil damage. But standing here surrounded by hundreds of crooked relics, you suspect it wasn't damage. It was design. Odd fact. The human spine, once ideal for climbing and crouching, began twisting as we evolved to walk upright. Herniated discs, sciatica, all of it costs of a posture our bodies still debate with evolution. You sit beside a shattered sacrum. It's oddly poetic, an anchor bone now severed. You imagine the moment a young dinosaur first felt that ache in its back and was told, "That's just how we walk," and never questioned it again. The silence here is dense, not peaceful, pressurized. The kind of quiet that builds like a bruise. And then you see something new, a print, but not a forward step, a turning one. 3 knuckle marks but angled. The turn of a creature rotating on one arm, followed by a tail drag, a curve, not a line, and then the rest of the trail heading off at a diagonal different from the herd. You follow it instinctively, not because it's fresher, because it's defiant. It winds through a corridor of trees where the canopy breaks slightly. You notice beams of light hitting the forest floor in strips. And in one of those beams, you find something that doesn't belong. A straight stick. You pick it up. It's a rib, fossilized but smooth. Nearly straight. You hold it up, and for the first time in hours, you see a clean line. No curve, no sag, just bone like a ruler. And there beneath it, another print, not just knuckles this time. A palm, pressed fully into the earth, not a fall, a gesture. You look around and see more. Not many, a few. Palm marks mixed among the old curled knuckle prints. Some subtle, some bold, all pointing in a new direction. Someone walked differently here, or tried to. You feel your pulse slow. Because what you're seeing isn't a rebellion, it's a reminder that not all of them stayed bent. That some, maybe only a few, sought to unfold. Not to escape tradition, but to remember something older. Something before the walk. The ground hums with the weight of it. Like the forest is holding its breath, wondering if you'll understand. You kneel again and place your own palm over the print. Your fingers align with the ghost of another. And just for a second, you imagine that dinosaur alone, perhaps, but upright. Not in full rebellion, not shouting into the void, but simply walking in a way that didn't hurt. Not louder, not faster, just different. A spine moving with ease. A hand pressing down not to carry weight, but to feel the earth again. You rise bone in hand and trace the new trail until it fades into moss. Not because the creature died, but because no one followed. Not yet. The trail you follow now is less like a path and more like a whisper. Faint palm prints scattered between older, deeper knuckle tracks. The forest thins slightly, letting you see further ahead, but there's a weight to the air. Not humidity, not pressure, something older. Like the trees themselves are holding on to a question they can't bring themselves to ask. You start to notice something stranger still. The prints you're following don't match perfectly with what you've seen before. The front limbs long, yes, but the fingers are straighter. More splayed. The claws shorter, less curled. There are even a few hind footprints beside them, more centered, with less dragging. Balanced. This one didn't just turn away from the circle, it stood differently. You kneel beside one of the clearer palm impressions, fingers spread like a starfish. Not curled under, not tucked. Flat, pressed with purpose. It's fresh enough to still hold texture, tiny grooves from the skin pads that weren't yet calloused into armor. This dinosaur wasn't just walking another way. It never fully walked on its fingers. Your brain scrambles for possibilities. Evolution doesn't do trial and error in a single lifetime unless it's a branch. A cousin species, a fork in the road you never knew existed, and then you see it, half buried in soil bones jutting from the roots of a tree like it tried to grow a skeleton instead of fruit. A full body, upright, balanced. You brush the dirt away slowly, reverently. The arms are long, yes, but not twisted forward. The shoulders are set differently, the spine straighter, the claws shorter, blunter not from wear but from purpose. They weren't tools or weapons or stilts. They were hands. The animal lay folded but not hunched. Its final position looks almost restful. Not collapsed, not dragged, just curled beside the roots as if it had chosen the tree. And there's something near its chest. A fossilized track slab, not from this one, but clearly placed. You can see overlapping knuckle prints preserved in the stone pressed into dried mud long ago and set there deliberately against the ribs. As if to remember, you sit back hard stunned. This one knew. It remembered the walk, but didn't walk that way, and yet it carried the imprint of it. Literally, like a relic, like a reminder. You imagine the story, a lineage that turned away, chose a new posture, not out of rebellion but reverence. They remembered where they came from, but moved forward anyway. Odd fact. Some ancient human cultures buried their dead with tools, not because they needed them, but because those tools told their story. It wasn't about use. It was about who they had been. This upright creature buried itself with a memory. You touch the preserved print. It's nearly identical to the ones you've been tracking all night. Same pressure, same angle, same gentle bow of the second knuckle. But here it's just a fossil, an artifact, not a lifestyle. And that changes everything, because now you realize not every dinosaur stayed in the loop. Some left the circle, some stood back up. Others carried the memory of bending without continuing to do it. You look at your own posture, bent slightly from crouching all night. You straighten it slowly, spine creaking, knees popping. And in that moment, you feel the lesson. Not all traditions are cages, but not all of them are maps either. Sometimes you carry a posture out of loyalty, and sometimes you let it go out of love. You follow the trail again, but it doesn't last long. The upright prints fade fast. Maybe there were never many of them. Maybe this one walked alone for a while, then lay down beneath the roots to return quietly to the earth. But your next surprise is waiting just ahead. Two skeletons, side by side. One bent, one straight. Their spines curve in opposite directions like quotation marks around a forgotten sentence. You stop in your tracks. It's not a fight. There's no trauma, no bite marks, no claw gouges. Just proximity and silence. Maybe they met at the end. Maybe they were companions. Maybe they had nothing in common except origin. But the way they lie now facing the same direction, just inches apart, you can't help but feel something poetic. One carried the posture to the grave. The other carried only the memory. Historians still debate whether dinosaur species overlapped like this, whether ancestral and derived lineages coexisted, or if one always outcompeted the other. But this scene offers no rivalry. No drama, just stillness. Just the idea that maybe there was room for both. You sit beside them watching as the breeze lifts dry leaves and lets them fall over bone and stone. You don't touch anything. You just witness. Because witnessing sometimes is the only gift the past asks for. Oddly, the forest around you doesn't feel solemn. It feels at peace. Like something has been explained not in language but in shape. The leaf litter muffles your steps as you rise. The sky above is still dark, but tinged now with the first bruises of morning light. You hear birds again, one then another, and then the forest starts to stretch and breathe with you. You've seen the loop and the line, the circle of tradition and the thread that left it. And somewhere inside you, the quiet parts of your brain start to shift. You remember the curved spines. You remember the cracked knuckles. But you also remember the palm pressed into the dirt, the one that chose. And so for a moment you press your own palm into the soil again. Not in mimicry, not in pain. Just to remember. You walk now without needing direction. The forest accepts you. The roots step aside, even the mist has softened as if you've earned the right to move through it. Ahead, the ground flattens into a dry basin wide and open, ringed by fallen logs and stone. You hesitate at the edge. It feels like the final page of a book that isn't finished. And in the center of the basin is a single trail, 3 knuckle impressions, evenly spaced, curving slightly toward the east, then gone. Just one set of tracks, alone. You kneel beside the first print. It's deeper than the others you've seen tonight, pressed with more weight, more finality. You run your fingers through the dirt inside it. The soil is dry, cracked, flaky, as if time itself has decided it's had enough. There's no wind here, only silence, and the faint hush of memory hanging in the air like mist that forgot to evaporate. You move to the next print. It's shallower, like the creature was lightening or fading or walking into a place that didn't need pressure anymore. And then you see the third, the final print, perfect, symmetrical. The claw tips curled just above the soil like punctuation, but behind it, nothing. No scuff, no smear, no drag. Just open earth. It didn't turn, it didn't fall, it just vanished. You sit down beside that last mark and stare into the absence. Not an end, not really. More like an erasure so complete that even the air doesn't remember what came next. Maybe the next storm blew it away. Maybe it walked too lightly for the ground to keep recording. Maybe it simply outlived the Earth's memory. You look back at the prints, 1, 2, 3. The final chord of a quiet melody, and then stillness. Odd fact. Desert elephants in Namibia travel hundreds of miles every year using trails so subtle even satellite imagery misses them, but the elephants remember. They always find the path even if the prints are long gone. Maybe this is like that. Maybe the trail doesn't end here. Maybe it just passed into a kind of silence the earth can't echo. You lie back in the dust head near the last mark body parallel to the trail, as if you too could follow. There's something sacred in a path that ends like this. A silence not of loss, but of choice. No collapse, no fossil. Just a step, and then air. You close your eyes and try to hear it. That soft rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, tap. But it's gone. Because some stories don't leave echoes. They just stop telling themselves. And somehow that's enough. You rise eventually. Brush off the dust. You don't follow the print. There is no more print. But you carry it with you. In your shoulders. In your knuckles. In your posture that will maybe for a day be a little softer. A little more curved, a little more respectful of all the weight that came before you. You followed a trail that began in the shadows of a forest and ended in the space where memory fades. Along the way, you watched a creature who walked not on feet but on the curled knuckles of hands once built for holding. A dinosaur whose entire species chose posture over pride, tradition over comfort. You witnessed the slow bow of time, the way joints thicken with memory, the way spines learn to lean. But you also saw play. You saw juveniles practicing the ritual of the walk, toppling with laughter before elders stepped in, not with scolding, but by example. You saw silence used not to hide, but to rule. You watched how predators louder and heavier were repelled not by teeth or claws, but by stillness. And then you found divergence. A dinosaur that chose not to walk on its fingers. One who remembered the tradition, carried its memory like a relic, but walked differently. Upright, balanced. And beside it, a fossil who stayed faithful to the old way until the end. Neither was wrong, both belonged. Because this story isn't about the correctness of posture, it's about the meaning of it. A circle walked to remember, a line drawn to imagine. A silence held not because it was easy, but because it mattered. And when the trail ends, it does so gently. No roar, no ruin. Just the soft breath of a final step that didn't need to be recorded. Because not everything ancient has to leave fossils. Sometimes it just leaves you.